Okay, so hello everybody. It is really, really lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us for this important webinar. This is one that we at the SVA wanted to make free and available to everybody because this is a legal requirement that is coming in very soon, and something that you will need to have in place on your websites and behind the scenes as well. Thank you very much to Joe Brianti, our data protection specialist, who is going to be speaking to us about this. And I love the way Joe puts all of this stuff into plain English for the likes of us to understand, because when you first glance at these things, they can be a bit scary sometimes. She's also going to provide us with the slides and a template to go away with. So that will come through to you probably later on this week after the webinar. You will also receive a recording of this webinar as well. So look out for that in your inbox. Right, okay. I'm going to hand over to Joe to get started. And I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to hearing what it's about and actually not being afraid of it. So Joe, over to you.
Cool. Lovely to see everybody. I can't believe there's over 100 people here, so let's hope I do this justice. Right, the first thing I want to say is there's been a lot of chat about the Data Use and Access Act, and I want to clarify. First of all, this does not replace GDPR or PECA or the Data Protection Act 2018. This is an addendum to GDPR. Okay. Now, it changes and tweaks several areas of GDPR. Some may not be relevant to you in your business. Okay. This part that I'm going to talk about today is relevant to every single business and every single data controller. So that is why when I spoke to Gwen, I said we would talk about the new data complaints policy requirements. Okay. Now, just a bit of background so that you understand. It got its royal assent, which means that the King's sign to say that this was a new law was in June last year. The main provisions of this were live and you were expected to be aware of in February this year. And the bit that I am going to talk about today, which is the complaints, the data complaints policy requirements, must be live by the 19th of June. Now, that probably sounds like, oh my God, I haven't got long, it's only 10 days. By the time you've finished the webinar, I would hope that you understand that this is a very simple amendment or change that you may or may not need to make, depending on how you run your business at the moment. And 10 days is easily doable, especially when I give you the template that you can use as a brief around that. So let's kick off. So there is a hard deadline on this. There is no exemption. Every organisation must have a formal data complaints process by the 19th of June. In a little while, I will explain what the data complaints process is and, importantly, what it isn't, because you need to understand that so that you deal with complaints in the right way in your business. The key thing that you need to understand is that if I've got a problem with the way that you are processing my personal data, I must now complain to you first. I cannot pick up the phone to the ICO without trying first to resolve it with you, the data controller. That is the key change here, because prior to, and up to the 19th of June, I could just go straight onto the complaints form on the ICO website and lodge an issue. That cannot happen, and it won't happen now. So you need to know and understand what you need to do, what you're legally obliged to do, and how you're going to manage it. This goes beyond your privacy notice. So you may have something that says on your privacy notice, if you've got any complaints, you can complain to the ICO. We need to rewrite that little paragraph in your privacy notice. But what you do is you need to put a reference in your privacy notice to say, if you have a complaint, you know, feel free to email me. We'll cover that in a bit. But I've got a detailed complaints policy, and just put a link. You know, if you're using it on your website, put a link there. Now, I've put here that the ICO will be watching. So what I mean by that is not that they're suddenly going to come and knock on your door on the 19th, 20th of June and check. So please, nobody leave here with a panic that the ICO are going to come knocking on your door. They really aren't. But if they get a complaint about you, then they will come and knock on your door. And the first thing they're going to say is, what is the complaints policy? Why has this person come to us first when they should have come to you? And why weren't they aware? So the goal of the ICO is that the complaints volume that they handle reduces, because us as data controllers resolve complaints and unhappiness with our data subjects without it getting to the ICO. And ideally, if we're really, really honest with ourselves, that's how we want it to be, because we want to be building trust and good relationships with our clients, our suppliers, and anybody else whose data we might collect. Okay. So the two core duties, and both are legally required. So this is not just here's the template that Joe gave me, I've put it on my website and everything's fine. You need to understand what you would do in the event that you may get a complaint. So first of all, you need to create and publicize a complaints process, right? That sounds tricky. It really isn't. Basically, what that means is that I need to be able to email you, or I need to fill in a form, or if you've got a customer portal, there must be a link in there that I can click on or contact you in some way, shape or form that says, I am not happy with the way you're processing my data, and that there is a process for me to follow to do that. You are not expected to go and create a separate email address like complaints at or whatever. But what you must remember is that there is a time element attached to this. So whatever email address you put on the complaints process, it must be one that is monitored fairly regularly. It must be one that is ensures that you're not going to get that email lost, you know, like in my mailbox where there's several hundred unread emails, I have a separate email inbox specifically for anything related to privacy. Now, if you're as bad at managing email as me, you may want a separate one. I would expect VAs to be slightly better at email, and therefore you won't have that need, okay? You want to, if you're putting this on your website, I want to be able to see that there is a complaints notice. So on the bottom of your website or wherever you keep them, and I'm saying the bottom because that's where the majority of businesses keep them, but I need to see the privacy notice, and I need to see a data complaints notice, and make it very clear that it's data complaints, because the service complaints is very different, okay? And within that process, you want the clear timescales of how you will manage this data complaint listed in the document up front. Okay, that's duty number one. Duty number 2, you must have a process. So you must acknowledge within 30 days. Now, what I have been saying when I have spoken to small businesses and VAs is that when they write a piece of legislation, they are very often thinking about much, much bigger businesses where they've got a DPO team and 30 days is realistic. May I suggest to you that if it takes you 30 days to respond as a solo operator or as a small team to a complaint, then I'd be a little bit worried. So the statutory obligation is 30 days. You may choose to make that less, but that is entirely your choice. Personally, what I would do is I would say you will be guaranteed an acknowledgement to your complaint within 30 days. Realistically, if you get one of these, you may turn that round within a couple of days. And that's the acknowledgement, because all you have to do in the first instance is say, I hear you, I see you, I've got your complaint, I'm going to do something about it. Now, what are you going to do about it? You are going to investigate without undue delay. So this is one of those really exciting moments, the same as with GDPR. What is undue delay? It's a bit like saying what is adequate or what is appropriate. This will vary depending on the size of the business. So again, as individuals, as business owners, you can choose what undue delay looks like. However, you must remember that a full response with regard to the complaint must be sent back to the individual within 3 months. So again, what I would say to you is, if you're a solo operator, or if you've got a team of any description, a small team, you may want to sort of deal with undue delay, i.e. as quickly as possible, because the sooner you address the issue, the sooner you try and fix it, the sooner it's off your plate. You don't have to worry about it, and you can get back on with the business of the day, and hopefully you've repaired any issues that may have arisen out of this complaint with your customer, your client, your supplier, and you've moved back on to business. But these are the statutory requirements. So there's nothing that stops you from sort of responding in 48 hours and having it all done and dusted in 10 days. Absolutely nothing. The other thing that you must do is document everything throughout. That sounds really complicated, but it isn't. You have a log in a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or whatever format you choose, and you want things like, what was the date of the complaint? Who was the person who made the complaint? Some brief notes around what was the complaint about. What action you've taken, when did you respond to them? How did you respond to them? Things like what did you find when you did your investigation? When did you reply to them with the full response? All those kinds of things. Just track every action that you take with regard to the complaint. Keep it in a spreadsheet. And what I suggest you do is you create this log and you put it in a folder called data complaints. And if you never ever have a data complaint, it doesn't matter. You have got it there. And look at this as insurance. Yeah. Every month we pay our professional indemnity. That is what you're going to do here. You are going to have this ready and waiting just in case. And you're then going to forget all about it until a complaint comes, if it comes. So, what is a data protection complaint? So, if I raise a subject access request against you and you handle it incorrectly, you handle it or you don't deliver on the deadlines that the regulation states, or if I'm not happy with the data that you've provided when I've asked for it, I can complain about that. If you have shared my contact details, if you have shared my personal details in any way, shape, or form, in a way that I'm not happy with because you haven't had my consent. Now, remember here, there's more than one legal basis. This one here speaks about consent. Now, if somebody complains that you have shared their data and consent is not the legal basis that you are using for collecting, processing, storing that data, you can go back and say to them, I'm sorry we didn't have your consent, but you signed, for example, you signed a contract and clause ABC in the contract says that I will share your data with my VA, or I will share your data with my bookkeeper or my accountant or my lawyer or whoever that is. So when it says here that I can complain about the data being shared without consent, I can. However, you may be sharing that data in order to deliver a contract. So that is part of your response in that space. If you have taken data from me to do some research, a survey, and there was a survey deadline, and or I've stopped being your client, and now 5 years later, you're still sharing my data or you're still holding my data, I can complain about that. If after I've received my data from you in a subject access request, I've asked you to delete it, or I've asked you to put right some errors, and you have failed to do that, I can make a formal complaint about that. Now, failure to delete, remember, if I ask you to delete my data, there may be data that you are not allowed to delete. So, for example, if you have got my name, email, home address, or business address in your Zero package or another finance package, and you need to retain that because you've invoiced me or I've invoiced you, and therefore you need to retain that for 7 years in line with the requirements of HMRC, you cannot delete that data. So if I complain to you that you haven't deleted my data, you can come back to me and say, I've deleted all of your client records. However, I cannot delete the data that I'm holding in Zero, Free Agent, QuickBooks, whatever else, because I have to retain that for 7 years. And I am expecting to be able to delete that data on the 10th of whatever date it is in whatever year, 7 years from now. Okay. If there has been a data breach that affects my personal data, I can complain to you about that, especially if I find out about it on the news, or through a chat, oh, she had a data breach, lost all my data. Oh, she was my customer, or I was her customer as well. I wonder if my data is gone. I can come to you and I can complain to you about that as well, because you have to be managing your relationships, your data, and your control, so that if a breach occurs, I'm told by you not in the local networking or wherever. So what does not count as a data protection complaint? If I am unhappy with the outcome of the subject access request. So, for example, if you have delivered everything that you've got to do on time, you've done an adequate job, you've given me the data that I should be allowed to have, then I can't complain if I don't like what I see in the data. That's it. I'm unhappy with the way you have delivered your service. That is not covered here. You will have a service complaint process or a way of managing, I'm not happy with the way you've answered my email or created my document or whatever it is. Okay. If I'm your employee, I cannot use the data protection complaint process to complain about the fact that you haven't given me a pay rise for the last 10 years, or that you've made me work on a Friday afternoon when actually I'd rather be in the pub, or all of those kinds of employee grievances. I'm being a bit flippant there, but you know where I'm going with that. And even if I raise a subject access request as an employee because I'm unhappy with things, I still cannot use the data protection complaint process to manage that. And service quality, again, it's very much related there to the customer service issues, and that is not included. It is assumed that you will have some other form of complaints process that your clients know how to do that. And this is really important. We talked in the other slide about they need a process, they need a way of contacting you. The complaint can be made verbally, written, it can be made via Facebook Messenger, LinkedIn Messenger, it can be made via Slack, WhatsApp, it can be a telephone call. Now, for those of you that have a team, once you have decided what your process is, you need to make sure that all of the team members know and understand what this process is, that they know and understand how to recognise a potential data protection complaint, and then they need to know what they do about it. So if one of your team members is my VA and I complain to her, she needs to know that she has to come to you as the lead VA as soon as possible with as much detail about the complaint so that you, the lead VA, can jump on that timeline and put into action your complaints process, okay? Right. 3 steps in the complaints process you must cover. You must acknowledge within 30 days, confirm the receipt, name the person who's going to handle this complaint. And again, can you see that this is written for much, much bigger companies where they might have a team of people managing lots of complaints? For you as solo operators, team operators, it's probably going to be you that is going to be running this. But when you confirm the receipt, say, I'm really sorry you're unhappy. I will come back to you within X number of days. Legally, that's 30 days that you will acknowledge it with, but you'll do it straight away. Set the expectations. The day count for you to respond starts the working day after the receipt. Okay, so if you receive the complaint at 4 o'clock on a Friday, the 3 months starts from the following Monday, in which time you have to respond. Okay, Now, you have to investigate without undue delay. Again, as I've said before, this is for bigger companies, really, because they're going to have to go through all these systems and processes and all those kinds of things. As a small business, yes, investigate without undue delay, but I wouldn't expect, unless you've got massive volumes of data, that it's going to take you 3 months to figure out what's gone wrong or whatever. And if it's about a subject access request, then you will know about that because you will have all that information to hand in your folder stored somewhere secure. So it should be, for organized people like yourselves, reasonably simple to investigate, understand what may or may not have gone wrong, and then the response must be within 3 months. Okay, so within the response, you need to explain what you found, any actions that you need to take, and you also, in that response, need to remind them that they can go to the ICO if they're still not happy with your response. Okay, now here's where I've been saying to people, you need to think about how you're managing your data on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and it really starts to tighten things up because, you know, if I complain to you, you come back with a response and I'm still not happy, and we haven't been able to resolve that with back and forward, and I go to the ICO. Moving forward, the ICO, when they get these complaints, are more likely to be investigating them in closer detail, because the idea is that they've got a lower volume and they assume that a lot of the complaints they're getting at the moment will drop off because us as data controllers are dealing with them. So use this as a way of thinking about your data. How are you dealing with it? What are you doing? Are my processes up to date? When was the last time you reviewed what you're doing in terms of collecting your data, storing your data retention, all of those kinds of things? Okay. Right. What your complaints policy must cover. Spell out what the data protection complaint is and what it isn't. And that list that I gave you earlier, it will be in the template, so don't worry too much about that. Commit to writing to acknowledge every complaint within 30 days. As I've said, that's the statutory requirement, but as small business owners, we're a little bit more agile. So, you know, I would hope that you're all able to, you know, acknowledge, investigate and respond within 30 days, never mind 3 months, because the sooner you respond, the sooner you get this done off your plate, you can stop worrying about it, and you can, as I say, go back to day-to-day happiness and joy. The outcome letter, this can be an email. They've referred to it as a letter, but it can be an email. What are your findings? What actions have you taken? And the right to escalate, as I've just said. You must make it very clear how I can make a complaint. You cannot mandate that I use any one of these, but you must offer, you know, a range of options for me. So if I'm a customer and you run a customer portal, there must be something in the portal that allows me to click and raise a complaint, even if that's just a form, you know, or there must be an email address. And if you're using your general day-to-day email address, make sure that these emails are not stuck in 200 unread emails, like they would be in my inbox, which is why I have a special email address for priority things like privacy stuff. You need to have a very clear idea of how you're going to investigate. And this is where you need to know about your data and your data processes. How are you collecting data? Where are you collecting it from? What's happening with your data? What are you doing with the data? Where do you store it? Is it OneDrive? Is it Dropbox? Is it Google Drive? It doesn't matter, but you need to know what those steps are in your business so that if you get a complaint and you say to somebody, yes, I'm going to investigate, I will have a response to you within 3 months, which is your statutory requirement. And then you look at the screen and think, I don't even know where I keep my client data, or I don't even know what I do with a newsletter, then I would suggest very politely, you've got a problem, right? Because you should, as a very basic level, know when a new prospect comes into my organization, I keep their data here. They then become a customer. I keep their information here as a customer with all their customer data, their files, whatever it is. And then when they stop being a customer, they move over to here. And then I've got a record of when their data is going to be deleted, which will be in 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatever the retention period you've decided is, okay? And the record keeping, create that log. This week, create that log on a spreadsheet, in your ClickUp form, in your OneDrive, whatever you choose, but just keep that log now. You may never ever use it, but I can promise you this, the day you get a complaint, if you don't know what you're doing, that's when you go into a head spin and think, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how I'm going to do it. So be ready just in case. Now, this is the other thing. You need to be able to update your privacy notice so that you can link it. So in your privacy notice, you need to be able to say, when it comes to data complaints, please see our data complaints process link here. And you need to be able to link the two together, okay? Because if I read your privacy notice to try and find out how to do the data complaints, and then it goes nowhere. So you need to be able to do that. One of the ways that I have seen this done by one of my clients, and this is, it's really possible for you to do this, is to have a section in your privacy notice that just covers the complaints. The concern I have had with that is that by putting process into the privacy notice, you're taking away from the purpose of the privacy notice, which is transparency about how you manage data. And that's why I'm recommending that you have this separate notice and it is sat on your website so that if I want to find it, I don't have to dig around inside your privacy notice. I can just click straight on a link on the home page of your website or any page where I'm at, and I can immediately see who I've got to email, what form I might use instead. If I'm a customer, can I use the portal to make a complaint, and how you're going to handle that complaint. Okay, so I always recommend that it's a separate document. It doesn't have to be massive, and you'll see that when I send you the template. So 2 roles, 2 sets of responsibilities, and many of you in this room will be both a data controller and a data processor. So as a data controller, remember, you decide what data is collected and how and why it is used. So the complaints process applies in full. You must, as a data controller, have that in place. You must know and understand what you're going to do to acknowledge, investigate, and respond to a complaint. And the examples of the kind of data that you might receive a complaint about is client records, client contact lists. It could be as simple as, I don't want to be on your email marketing list. That's a very simple one. Oh, at the bottom of the email, please unsubscribe, or would you like me to unsubscribe you? Yeah, it can be that simple. Now, as a VA, you then become a processor because you are processing records on behalf of your client. And it is your client that owns the complaint. So if you are working on your client's client data and they complain to you, I don't like the way she's keeping my files in that new system of hers, it's not working. Your obligation as a VA is to tell your client, tell your data. I'm going to put my teeth back in and start again. If the client complains to you as the VA, it is your obligation to go to the lead VA. That's better. Got it right now. To the lead VA and tell the lead VA, Joe's not happy with the way you're keeping her data in that new system. It is then the obligation on the lead VA, who is the data controller, to have that conversation with the client. Your obligation as the processor is done. Okay? So if you're the processor and you get a complaint and it's the wrong, it could be a service or a quality complaint. That should still go to the lead VA, but the lead VA will manage it differently. But it is your responsibility as the processor, any complaints, to send them to the lead VA. Your contracts, they must have clauses as VAs, and lead VA for team members have a clause that covers notification and cooperation. So in the same way as your contracted or your contract should have clauses in them that talk about how you manage a subject access request as a processor and a controller, that must now generate a clause that talks about how you as a VA to the lead VA will support with complaints processes. Okay. And there must be clear steps to take. So as a processor, you must know and understand from your lead VA or from the data controller, if that's a client, what are your obligations? What are the next step? And once you've forwarded that complaint, what is the next step after that? Is there anything? In theory, you've completed your obligations, but what then might that lead VA or client need from you in terms of help to resolve the complaint or to investigate the complaint? So I've put a note here. Most businesses operate as both a controller and a processor at different times. And that's so obvious for VAs because you're a controller in your own business, you're a processor when you're working for your client or when you're working for the lead VA. Okay. So your implementation checklist. Now, bearing in mind that I first delivered this back in March, so I'd kind of spread it out a little bit, but all of this is doable. There's nothing too complicated about this. Make sure you update your privacy notice. Add the right to complain to you directly. And how do you do it? You can put a link from your privacy notice and have a separate written notice, and you will get the template later this week, so you can put that on your website fairly quickly. Establish your submission channels. Now, you may already have these for queries on your privacy notice anyway, because there should be a way of contacting you from your privacy notice anyway. So you might not need to change anything, So when I say establish the submission channels, that might just be what you're already doing right now. So you might not need to do anything there at all. Your complaints policy, you'll have a template, you'll be able to tweak that to your heart's content, make it sound like you, and that sort of thing. For those of you with a VA team, train your team. Make sure that they know and understand what this is all about. Make sure they know and understand what their obligations are. Make sure they know and understand how to get a complaint to you and in what time frame. So realistically, if a member of your team receives a complaint, you don't want them waiting for like 30 days to get it to you. You want it ASAP, because as the lead VA, you have to do the processing of that, and you have the 30 days to respond. Create templates. So again, depending on the size of your team, what is your standard acknowledgement letter? Do you need to give a progress update? Do you need to have a template outcome? Some of that wording there is for slightly bigger companies where, there is a separate person or a team of people just looking after privacy. What you need to think about is, you could have an email that you draft and store it in your drafts. In Outlook, you can create your own templates. There is an easy wizzy way. The other thing that you can do is create it as a Word document, keep it in a folder somewhere. And if it does happen, you just copy and paste the text into the email and use that as a basis, and you might want to tweak it individually. Set up your complaints log, so straightforward, it's a spreadsheet. And make sure, if you are the lead VA, that your contracts hover asking your team members or telling your team members what their obligations are in terms of how quickly they will notify you. And it should be just a tweak there, because you should already have a clause in your contract that says that if you receive a subject access request, the team member is obligated to support you to resolve that. So you should be, just extending that basic sort of set of clauses around there. Last slide, key takeaways. This is a legal obligation. It's not optional, and it is not a suggestion, but I promise you it's not really that difficult. And 90% of the people who are on this call today will not get a single complaint, in the same way as you will not get a subject access request. But if you don't know what you're doing and you get one and you get the timelines wrong, that's when people are going to go to the ICO and say, they didn't respond to my complaint. And that's when it opens up the door for the ICO to knock on your door. Okay, so be ready and then file it. And if you never use it, great. It's a bit like your insurance, okay? Know your role. Know when you are the controller. Know when you are the processor. And know what your obligations are when you are in each of those different roles. 30 days to respond, investigate, 3 months to send the final outcome and get your log sorted. And the final thing I put there is start now. Don't have nightmares, as they say on that very famous television program, because it's not complicated. But just, I would expect that it would take you a couple of hours, one afternoon, when you've got nothing else to do, because, well, whatever. Sorry, just being a bit flippant there, but just put a couple of hours aside for it, get it on your website by the 19th of June, and then park it. But you must have it done. Okay.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you. It's really good to hear that you've explained it really well, and it's good to know our obligations there. Like I say, this is something that we will be filtering into the requirements when you sign up as an SVA approved VA. It will be part of our criteria as it's a legal requirement, so something we will check on. Um, but like Joe says, it's not that difficult to set up, and it doesn't actually take a whole lot of time. I did ours a few weeks ago, and it didn't take too long at all. It wasn't too onerous, along with all of our other obligations we have to meet.
Can I just
So,
say, if you already have a complaints process, you know, for your service quality or any of customer service,
mhm,
you just tweak what you're doing for that. Only the focus this time, it feels more complicated because the word data is there. But effectively, what you're doing every day in your business is somebody can contact you and tell you that they're not happy with how you're managing the data. You are then responding to them. You're telling them when you're going to investigate, how you're going to investigate. Then you're going to give them a reply that says, I've investigated. This is what I found. This is what I've done. This is why I've done it. Um, and you're going to work with them to try and make them understand and be happy, because what we don't want is people complaining about us, do we? Whether it's data or anything else. So it really, really, really isn't as complicated as it sounds. And don't let that word data in front of complaints make it feel like something it really isn't.
definitely, definitely. And Joe is always at hand if we have any data
Yeah,
protection questions, which you are a godsend, Joe. And I am so grateful that you have taken the time to talk us through this today. It's really been massively helpful. Um, Before
that's
you
all.
all leave, and obviously, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat while Joe is still here because she will do her best to answer them. I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you before you all run away because there's a couple of things I need to say. So, first of all, the survey is closing for submissions on the 30th of June. Please, if you haven't filled it in, could I beg some time from you to fill it in? We really, the more submissions we get, the better, because it gives us a better picture of what's going on in the industry, which helps us, it helps you, and it's also used a lot by the media, which gives them a better picture of actually what we do, because they really don't get it. So this is really helpful for that, and certainly to see what's coming up in the future as well. So please take some time to do that. If you aren't already a member of the SVA, go forward slide. There we are. If you aren't already a member of the SVA, please do come along and join us. It's £15 one off for community members or £15 a year for SVA approved members. We we used to be free. We do ask for money now because we've got a lovely fancy website now, which does cost money. And obviously, like today, we had over 300 people sign up for this webinar. So we had to pay for the extra Zoom package to make the room for everybody. So we do have costs that go out, and we all volunteer doing this as well. So we have put a little fee in place for the SVA. But if you would like to join us, you will get access to webinars with useful information. You'll get on our newsletter. There's so many benefits. So have a peruse of the website. That's my salesy bit done. Right, let me find you again. Stop share. That's the one. Back over here. So thank you all very much for joining us today. You will receive the recording possibly tomorrow. I'll have to wait for it to cook, and then I'll just top and tail it, and I will send that out to everybody. And towards the end of the week, Joe's going to send me the slides from this, and she's also going to send me some templates. So I will share those with all of you. So they will be coming very soon. And good luck with it. Like I say, if you have any questions, do either come to us or come to Joe. We will do our very best to help you. And yeah, it's not as big and scary as it sounds when we first see it. No, when I first saw the name come up, it was like, what now? What else have we got to adhere to? But yeah, I think this isn't too painful in the scheme of things. So thank you. I shall let you go away and have lunch if you haven't already. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And it's really good to see you all. Take care.